Hey gamers, I'm Chris. This is Treantmonk's Temple, where knowledge is power. We are still in the season of the Gish, and once again, a Gish is a character that combines the use of spellcasting and martial weapons, usually arcane spellcasting. But we're going to change gears a little bit now because we have been talking primarily about characters that use primarily either spells and or martial weapons that are melee based. But today we are going to focus on archery. Today I'm going to show you my build for the ultimate archer, as in a 20th level character that is as effective in archery as I think it is possible to get. Now, it is important to note that a lot of campaigns don't go to 20th level, and when you're talking about a lower level campaign, this isn't necessarily your best bet for an archer build. Now, next week we will be doing a build for a Hexblade where I am going to be making it an archer character, and I think that is a really strong spellbow for level 12 or lower. But this build today we're going to focus on is probably stronger at 20th level than that build is. So we're going to level this one right up to 20th level, and then next week when we do our Hexblade build, we're going to do that one to 12th level. Is the point where I think that build really becomes as good as it's going to get. I recently had a comment on a video saying, why do you keep leveling up to 20 when not every campaign goes up to 20? In fact, most don't. And that's a good point. So today we're going to do a build that goes to 20th level, and then our next build for archery will go to 12th level. So let's get started. I think a Battle Master makes a great archer. Now, the thing to remember about a Battle Master is, number one, they're not your best choice necessarily for damage. Most of their abilities add a bit of damage, but they have some secondary effect, and that's kind of the point of that. The second thing is, Battle Master doesn't necessarily have the staying power of other fighter builds, because those Battle Master maneuvers tend to run out very quickly, and although you get them back every short rest, you could be done them in a round or two, and then after that you don't have any left, so you have to kind of use them carefully. Now the second possibility is an arcane archer. Now it might seem like an arcane archer is the obvious choice when we're talking about a Gish, but arcane archers don't get spellcasting except for a cantrip, so they really aren't a Gish character. And again, just like with the Battle Master, they get their arcane arrows that do a special ability and maybe a bit of damage, but again, now you're only getting 2 per short rest, and those go really, really fast. So today what we're going to do is we're going to make an Eldritch Knight, and we're going to take it to 20th level. I think this is a very strong build for an archer character, maybe the best build for an archer character if you've got. So let's get started on our character. We're getting rid of our homebrew content, our magic, and our Eberron. We're not going to use any of those. Now we're going to look at our race. Now there are a few options here for race. First off, if you're going to play a character that maybe is going to 5th level or lower, or very low levels, the choice to pick is the Variant Human. Now if you are going to play in a campaign that is just going to go to very low levels, but you want to make this style character, your choice is Variant Human. That's just really obvious. If it's a campaign that's going to be primarily at low levels, then Variant Human becomes a necessity. And what you want to do then is you're going to take your bonus feat and you're going to take Crossbow Expert. And then you're going to grab yourself a hand crossbow. That's going to give you a shot with your bonus action on each round. Now, once you get to higher levels, those bonus actions, you're going to have some other options for them. But at low levels, you don't. And you're only looking at 1 attack a round, so essentially you're doubling it with Crossbow Expert at the cost of you having a D6 to damage instead of a D8, which isn't a big sacrifice. So you end up doing quite a bit more damage. The Variant Human will still give you a +1 in dexterity, which you need to get your 16 dexterity. And you're going to find at levels 1 to 4, this character is far more powerful an archer than anything else you can make. But then once you get to 5th level and above that, it goes down bit by bit. And by 20th level, it's not nearly your best option. Now with the build we are going to make, you really have just a couple options. The first option is a half-elf. Half-elf tends to be good at a lot of different things, and it is reasonably good at this. You can put your +1 in dexterity where you need it, +1 in constitution, and then you get a +2 to charisma that isn't all that useful. But using the variants of half-elf, you can get some additional abilities too that are useful. But in general, I think you're better off just playing a full elf. Now, when it comes to elves, you really can just pick anything you like. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Shadowkai elf. I think the Shadowkai elf offers a couple extra bonuses that are really useful here. Number one, you're going to get a Misty Step. Now, as an Eldritch Knight, we will have access to Misty Step, but we don't have a lot of spell slots, and we won't get Misty Step till a much higher level. So being able to cast it at an earlier level is useful. Furthermore, the Shadowkai gets resistance to all kinds of damage after they do their Misty Step once they reach 3rd level. So this is very useful, especially as some kind of retreat. You get caught in melee, you Misty Step out, then even if they go after you after that, you can have resistance to all their damage. Now, it's only once per day, but still very useful ability. As a Shadowkai, we will also get resistance to necrotic damage. Necrotic damage is something that doesn't come up a huge amount, but against PCs it happens often enough that I think resistance to it is a reasonably good ability. Plus, we're going to get all the stuff you would expect from an elf. We're going to get Arcane Senses, which is going to give us the perception skill. That's useful. Dark Vision, which of course is very useful. And things like our Fey Ancestry and that kind of thing as well. Furthermore, our ability score bonuses, we're going to get a +2 bonus to Dexterity. That's right where we want it. And we're going to get a +1 bonus to Constitution, which is also really good. So all in all, this particular version of elf, I think, fits exceptionally well for this build. Naturally, we're going to start out with 1 level of fighter. And we're going to get 2 skill proficiencies to start out. Now, with an archery kind of character, I like to have things like acrobatics and athletics. They tend to affect things like maneuverability. Whether you're climbing a tree or you're balancing somewhere, acrobatics and athletics are things that are going to come up. The fighting style should be obvious enough. We're going to start with archery. That's going to give us a +2 to hit with all ranged weapons. Then we're going to our ability scores. Now, again, we could use point buy here, or we could use standard array. I'm going to just use standard array. It works just fine for this build. Now, what we want to do is we want to pump up our dexterity to the maximum. That's a 15 to the dexterity, which means 17 for our total score. Now, normally 16 is enough, but because we're going to take advantage of the Elven Accuracy feat, 17 really works nicely here. With a +1 to our Constitution, a 13 Constitution works just fine. +1 gives us 14. That's a nice bonus. Certainly enough for an archer character. Now I'm going to put a 14 in Intelligence. Intelligence is the primary ability score for our spells. I should mention that in general, our spells aren't going to rely on our intelligence very much. We're going to be picking spells that don't rely on intelligence. So that 14 Intelligence is actually negotiable. I'm going to put a 12 to Wisdom. It's a save that comes up reasonably often. I'm going to put a 10 in our Strength. We're not going to use Strength a lot with this character. And then the Charisma is an 8. We're not going to be using, this is not a Charisma-based character. So now I'm going to go to the background. For this background, I'm just thinking this is Shadowkai, so he comes from a long distance away. So I'm going to take the Far Traveler background. That's going to give me skill proficiency in Insight and another skill proficiency that I can make whatever I want. And I'm going to make it Stealth. This is a character that's going to have a good dexterity. He's going to actually be pretty good at stealth. Tool proficiency doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and take Dice Set. And the language doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and take Sylvan. So I'm going to start by choosing leather armor, longbow, and 20 arrows. Obviously, as an archer, I want the longbow and the arrows. Leather armor is not the armor I particularly want. I want at least studded leather, but leather armor will do for now. Now, generally with this character, what you're going to want to do is if you can get yourself a decent medium armor, that's going to serve you better at the lower levels. Once you get to the higher levels, studded leather is really the way to go because you're going to have a 20 dexterity anyway, so that's a +5. You don't want to be stuck with an armor that's going to limit your bonus to +2. Now we can choose a martial weapon and a shield or 2 martial weapons. Thing is that a shield takes an action to equip, so it's really not worth it for us to take that. So we're going to go ahead and take 2 martial weapons. Now the martial weapons I'm going to take are short swords. I'm going to take 2 short swords. By taking 2 short swords, what it does is if I get stuck in melee, I can use 1 short sword. It is a finesse weapon. And if I'm stuck in melee for more than a round, on the second round I can pull that second short sword and I can get another attack with my bonus action. Now when we're combining this with things that might increase our damage to all weapons, and we will have some options for that, that will add to both attacks. So it will increase my overall damage output as compared to using, say, a rapier. We can choose a light crossbow and 20 bolts or 2 hand axes. In either case, I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and take the crossbow. Maybe I can give it to somebody else. And then I can choose a Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack. It doesn't matter what you pick. They're both reasonably good. I'll take the Dungeoneer's pack. So our first level character is ready to go. We got our ultimate archer here, Shadowkai Elf. So we're going to have our dark vision and all that kind of stuff. We have 5 starting proficiencies because we started with keen senses. Stealth and acrobatics are our specialties. We have +5 in each of those. Perception is still +3, which is decent. +3 to insight, which is okay. +2 to athletics isn't great, but athletics comes up quite often. Sometimes you don't always have the choice of whether you make an athletics roll or not. And I'll take a +2. Our main weapon is going to be our longbow. We're going to have a +7 to hit with it. 1d8 +3 damage. That's as good as you're going to get at first level. Our starting armor class is 14. That's not great, but for an archer, that's fine, especially at first level. And we do have 12 hit points, which is good for an archer for first level. Most kinds of builds you're going to make are going to have less hit points than that. Remember, we can Misty Step with this character once per day. Even a wizard can't Misty Step till 3rd level. So being able to do that first level is quite nice. We also have our second wind, which means we can do some healing as a bonus action on our round. We don't have a lot of things to do with our bonus actions. If we go into melee, we might want to use 2 swords, in which case we'd be using our bonus action. And that's about it. So we're going to go back and level this character up to level 3. At level 3, we're going to pick our martial archetype, and that is going to be the Eldritch Knight. Now, it's important to mention at 2nd level, we got our action surge. This is a big deal for fighter characters because you get to take another action. And you get this back every short rest, so it comes up reasonably often. Now, most cases where we do a fighter multi-class, we get less out of an action surge because usually what ends up happening is you end up getting your extra attack at level 5, and that's it. So then you use your action surge and you're going to get 2 extra attacks. But with this character, we can actually use our action surge eventually to get 4 extra attacks. So now we're going to pick some spells. We're going to get 2 cantrips. We're going to get 3 first level spells. So if I am making an archer and I have the opportunity, the very first cantrip I will always take is Mending. This spell repairs a single break or tear in an object you touch, such as a broken chain link, 2 halves of a broken key, a torn cloak, or a leaking wineskin. Or how about this? How about a broken arrow? Because according to the rules, when you fire an arrow, you will recover 50% of them. Now the other 50%, it really kind of depends what environment you're in. If you're, say, on the top of a cliff, it's perfectly reasonable for the DM to say that the arrows you didn't recover went over the cliff. But what if you're in a dungeon, which is pretty common, or any kind of enclosed area? Well, then the arrows didn't go anywhere, so they must have broken. So what do? You cast Mending, you get them back. In any case where you're playing a campaign where arrows are tracked, that's a problem. Now, if we think about this character, I mean, it's not going to take very many levels for us to be shooting 2, maybe even 3, 4 times in a round. So when you have 20 arrows in a quiver, that's like 5 rounds worth of arrows. That's maybe 1 combat. So even if you're having 2 quivers, now you're set probably for 1 combat for sure, maybe 2 combats. Now, I don't know what kind of campaigns you play in, but we're not in a market every couple combats in most campaigns I play in, so you need some way to mitigate that loss of arrows. Now, there's 2 ways this works. Sometimes the DM doesn't care, right? As long as you have arrows on your character sheet, they don't care if you keep track of them. You got arrows, let's not keep track, it's a pain in the neck. But other DMs are sticklers, especially if you get into things like Roll20, where it's really easy to keep track of each arrow that's fired. You are going to run out. Mending will take care of that for you. It's well worth it. Easily the best cantrip you can take as an archer character. Second cantrip I'm going to take is Minor Illusion. Now, I've talked about Minor Illusion before, and with an archer, Minor Illusion is so good because you can end up in situations where there is no cover. And with Minor Illusion, you can create your own cover. And if you can create your own cover, that's just going to be an armor class boost for you because now you're going to have cover against attacks. Just that ability to use your terrain. If you don't have terrain, you can make your own. So that brings us to our first level spells. And the first one should be no surprise to anybody. We're going to take Find Familiar. I've talked about Find Familiar so many times. I will talk only briefly about it this time. The big thing here is Find Familiar, of course, has all kinds of uses in terms of scouting and that kind of thing, but it also has combat use because a Find Familiar can, on its turn, perform the help action. That help action gives you advantage. Advantage means you are more likely to hit. The second spell I'm going to take is the Shield spell. The shield spell will allow us to use a reaction to get a +5 bonus to armor class. This is going to give us a better armor class eventually than any other fighters normally get. Eldritch Knights are strong on defense, partially because of the shield spell. The final first level spell I'll take is the Absorb Elements spell. What Absorb Elements basically does is you use a reaction, you're going to get resistance to the type of damage that you were just about to take. This happens all the time. So whenever you're going to take energy damage, you can use the Absorb Elements spell, have the damage. Now, if you are stuck in melee, you can technically get a +1d6 damage to your next melee attack, but that's not the main feature of this spell. The main feature of this spell is resistance to the type of damage you're going to take. It comes up a lot. It's a very good spell. This is our character at 3rd level. Our attack hasn't changed, but now we've added the ability to add an action surge, which can give us an extra attack on a round. We also have 3 different spells we can use. Find Familiar should give us advantage on pretty much every attack we're making at this level. Furthermore, we have our shield spell and our Absorb Element spell. Those both will give us the ability to reduce the damage we would otherwise take. And then finally, the Mending spell allows us to recover arrows that we couldn't have otherwise recovered. So we've helped our character defensively, offensively, and we've made ammo no longer something to be concerned about. So we're going to jump this character up to level 5, and we get our first ability score improvement. Now what we're going to be doing here, you have some choices. There's a good reason why you might want to take Sharpshooter just as soon as possible. Because we've got Find Familiar, we can get advantage on 1 attack a round. That means we can often apply the Sharpshooter -5 to hit, +10 damage, and get a significant damage output out of that. Furthermore, we're going to ignore the cover of our enemies, which comes up over and over again. And plus, our archery combat style mitigates 2 out of those -5 you get for your Sharpshooter feat. But I'm going to take the Elven Accuracy feat instead. The reason I'm going to take Elven Accuracy is, number 1, it's going to bring my Dexterity up to an 18. So that brings my +3 to a +4. That's more damage and a better chance to hit. Furthermore, because we have the Find Familiar spell, we can expect to have advantage on that first attack every round. Advantage combined with the Elven Accuracy feat now means we're going to get 3 dice instead of 2 on that advantage. It's pretty much going to hit all the time. So here's the Elven Accuracy feat. The accuracy of elves is legendary, especially that of elf archers and spellcasters. You have uncanny aim with the attacks that rely on precision rather than brute force. You gain the following benefits. Increase your dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20. So we'll increase our dexterity to 18. Whenever you have advantage on an attack roll using dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, you can re-roll one of the dice once. So we're going to roll twice for advantage, and then we're going to re-roll one of those dice. Now we're going to get one more first level spell. We have a couple options here. Generally speaking, we're going to be using all our spell slots on shield and absorb elements, but I like to have a Featherfall spell handy just because once in a blue moon, when it comes up, it's very vital that you have it. And it's very circumstantial, but as a backup and a spell we're not normally going to cast, it's nice to have it in your back pocket. So as a 5th level character, the big difference here is we are now attacking twice a round. And because we're not playing around with multiclassing, we're getting that right at 5th level, which is where you want it. If you're an archer, you want to be getting your 2nd arrow at 5th level. Otherwise, 5th level is painful. When you are playing a melee character, you can often mitigate that pain by using Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. With an archer, you have no such option. So if you're not getting your 2nd attack at 5th level is going to hurt bad. In this case, we're getting our 2nd attack right where we want it. Now when we use our action surge, we're getting 2 additional attacks, which means we can get up to 4 arrows in one round. We should be getting advantage on one of those arrows. That advantage should involve 3 dice. Plus, as a fighter, we have great hit points. We're going to have a strong constitution modifier, which is going to come into effect as we start to concentrate on spells. That's not happening yet, but it's going to happen soon. Now, because we increased our dexterity modifier, we now have a +9 to hit because our proficiency bonus went up and our dexterity went up. That's a huge modifier, especially with advantage. Then we're doing d8 plus 4 damage on each arrow. So we're just going to jump 1 level right now to level 6. We are going to get another ability score improvement. There is lots of reason why you might think that dexterity is the right choice here. And I totally understand if you do, but I think the right choice here is Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is going to increase our damage a lot. Number one, we're going to avoid cover. So when an enemy is behind partial cover, we will still hit them just as often as if they were in the open. And because we have a huge bonus to hit, that's going to be often. Furthermore, we can take a -5 to hit to get a +10 to damage. This is something we're going to do a lot. I'm going to link below ThinkDM's beautiful spreadsheet on using Sharpshooter effectively. If you haven't already checked it out, please do. It is going to be useful for you to know exactly when it is worthwhile to apply Sharpshooter. Because with this character, of course, if you're facing an opponent that has a really high armor class, it still might not be worth it to apply Sharpshooter. But because with fighters, we're not adding as many additional kinds of damage as we are if we're, say, playing a Hexblade build or those kinds of builds, Sharpshooter becomes effective a lot more often than with those builds. Furthermore, because we have a higher bonus to hit because of the archery combat style, once again, Sharpshooter becomes more effective. So it is something that we're going to apply probably most of the time. Now with 2 arrows around, that's an additional 20 points of damage every round. I want to also mention Weapon Bond. At 3rd level, you learn a ritual that creates a magical bond between yourself and one weapon. You must perform the ritual over the course of 1 hour, which can be done during a short rest. The weapon must be within your reach throughout the ritual, the conclusion of which you touch the weapon and forge the bond. Once you've bonded a weapon to yourself, you can't be disarmed of that weapon unless you're incapacitated. If it is on the same plane of existence, you can summon that weapon as a bonus action on your turn, causing it to teleport instantly to your hand. You can have up to 2 bonded weapons, but can summon only 1 at a time with your bonus action. If you attempt to bond with a 3rd weapon, you must break the bond with one of the other 2. So let's explain just quickly how that's going to work. You're going to bond your Longbow. That means you're never going to be able to be disarmed with it. Furthermore, you can drop it in combat. Let's say you get stuck in melee and you want to drop it and pull some short swords. You can just drop it and then later on you can summon it again. So now we're going to jump up to 8th level. So at 7th level, we get access to 2nd level spells. Right now we're going to have access to 2 2nd level spells. The 2 spells I'm going to pick are Mirror Image, first of all. Now Mirror Image, again, it's a spell we're only going to want to really cast if we have an ability to cast it before the beginning of a combat. I mean, technically speaking, we could use our Action Surge to use it if we are in a situation where defense is very important, but the use of our shield spell will generally give us a pretty good defense, and we have a lot of hit points. We have a good constitution save, so it's not necessary to necessarily have Mirror Image up all the time. But if you are going into combat and you have a chance to prepare, Mirror Image does not require your concentration, and it's going to give you 3 images. It's essentially going to turn 3 hits on you into misses. This also means 3 potential concentration saves will also be turned into misses. The second spell I will take is Magic Weapon. Now, if I was not Shatter Kai, I might choose Misty Step here, but I do have the use of 1 Misty Step per day already. So taking Misty Step now is a little bit redundant. It's still useful because Misty Step sometimes comes up more than once a day, but I find it's less useful than it otherwise would be. Magic Weapon, what it's going to do for me is if I'm using a weapon that's not magical, it's going to give it that +1 bonus to attack and damage. And sometimes at this level, we haven't found that magic Longbow yet. If that's the case, we definitely want to use this. It's a long duration. It's going to use our concentration, but right now we're not concentrating on anything else. It's going to give us a +1 to hit and to damage. If you are playing a character where you took Crossbow Expert, this is a must because you're very unlikely to have a magic hand crossbow. At least you can get your hand crossbow to that +1 point. Now we're going to get to the point we're not going to be concentrating on Magic Weapon at all because there are going to be better spells for us to concentrate on. But that hasn't happened yet. So at this point, Magic Weapon's a useful spell for us to have. At 8th level, we have 2 options. We can either go with the Crossbow Expert feat. Now the Crossbow Expert feat is going to let us fire in melee without any disadvantage. So that's obviously taking advantage of our Sharpshooter feat, even when we're in melee. Now we have the ability to get our 2 short swords out in melee and use them, but they're not nearly as effective as using a longbow. So there is advantage in that. Secondly, if we're going to use a hand crossbow, we can use our bonus action to get an additional attack on our round. So that also very useful, especially at these lower levels when we have less things to do with our bonus action. I am going to go ahead and take Dexterity here just because I want that bonus to hit and that bonus to damage. The bonus to hit is particularly useful in combination with the Sharpshooter feat. Remember, we want that Sharpshooter feat to hit as often as possible, and that +1 bonus to hit is very useful. The second thing to remember about a Crossbow Expert feat is it relies on you using a hand crossbow. Now, if you're playing in a campaign where maybe you have large portions of downtime and your GM lets you craft your own magic weapons, you can craft your own magic hand crossbow. But in most of the campaigns I've played in, the magic weapons we tend to find, if they're ranged, tend not to be hand crossbows. Usually it's a longbow. So what I would expect is when I find a +1 weapon or a +2 weapon, it's probably going to be a longbow, maybe a short bow, probably not a hand crossbow. So taking a feat that ties us down to one weapon has a significant downside. So let's jump this character up to level 11. I should briefly mention the War Magic ability. Beginning at 7th level, when you use your action to cast a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action. This is not something I'm going to use very often. Now I might use it to maybe use my minor illusion to create cover and then make one weapon attack, but in general I'm better off doing 2 weapon attacks than a cantrip and 1 weapon attack. At 9th level, I will be getting Indomitable, which is going to give me a chance to re-roll a saving throw that I missed. Eventually, this is going to be quite useful when we're talking about concentration saves. And at 10th level, we're going to get Eldritch Strike. At 10th level, you learn how to make your weapon strikes undercut a creature's resistance to your spells. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, that creature has disadvantage on the next saving throw it makes against a spell you cast before the end of your next turn. Now, again, our intelligence isn't terrific. It's okay, but it's not terrific, and our spells are fairly low level. We're mostly going to be using those to increase our ability to either improve our defense or our offense. We're generally not using the kind of spells where we're targeting an enemy. So this is not something that's going to come up a lot. There will be opportunities to use it to some degree, but it is one of those things that it kind of looks really good, but it doesn't come up all that much. Now at 11th level, we will get an extra attack. That means 3 attacks around. This is a really big deal because it means when we use our action surge, we're now getting 6 attacks in 1 round. Now at this point, we have got another cantrip and 2 more spells known. Now there's no must-haves here in the cantrip department anymore, but you know which spells are good. Things like Mage Hand are good, Prestidigitation is good. I'm going to go ahead and take Mage Hand. I find it a useful spell. Now I'm going to have 2 more spells known here. I'm going to take 2 2nd level spells. The first one I'm going to take is Flaming Sphere. Flaming Sphere is what it's going to do is it's going to give me a bonus action option on my turn. I'm going to use a single action to start this spell out. I might use an action surge to do it in the first round of combat, and then each round as a bonus action I can use it to hit my enemies. They save or they take 2d6 damage. It's not a big deal, but until I have things to do with my bonus action all the time, it gives me 1 more option. Now it does use my concentration, so it's not at the same time as magic weapon. It's one or the other. So if I have a magic weapon at this point, like a +1 longbow, Flaming Sphere is my better option. Second spell I'm going to take is Misty Step. Misty Step is, as I mentioned, very useful. I can use it once per day with my Shadow Kai ability. That's always going to be the first Misty Step I use. Then I can use additional Misty Steps if I need them. So we're going to go to level 13. So at level 12, we get an ability score improvement. I am going to take the Crossbow Expert feat at this point. This is a feat I knew I would eventually want, just because it gives me the ability to fire in melee. And with our Sharpshooter ability, we want to be able to fire wherever we get stuck. Furthermore, if I do have the ability to get a magic hand crossbow, I do get that bonus action attack. So I am going to remove my knowledge of the Flaming Sphere spell. It's something I'm going to trade up right now. And for 3rd level spells, I'm going to take 2 choices. The first I'm going to take is Counterspell. You guys know how useful Counterspell is. It can be a game changer against a high level mage. Having a fighter who can cast Counterspell is additionally useful. But the second spell, and kind of the big deal here, is taking Haste. Haste is a 1-action cast. You choose a willing creature you can see within range. In most cases, that's going to be yourself. Until the spell ends, the target speed is doubled. It gains a +2 bonus to armor class, has advantage on dexterity saving throws, and it gains an additional action on each of its turn. That action can only be used to take the attack action, dash, disengage, hide, or use an object action. So in most cases, we're going to do the attack action. It's limited to one attack, but that's one extra attack. Now, if we do need to dash or disengage or hide, we can do all those things with the haste action, and then we use our regular action that's going to have 3 regular attacks to attack. This lasts a minute. It's going to last an entire combat. So you cast it in your very first round in combat. You're going to have 4 attacks a round, just base. So here's our character at level 13. 108 hit points is plenty for this level. Now it's showing an armor class of 17. That's based on non-magical studded leather and no bonuses. So we're going to have bonuses from magic leather. We're going to have bonuses from rings of protection. We're probably looking at an armor class closer to 20. Remember, if we're hasted, that's going to be additional +2. We can also cast the shield spell on top of that, meaning we can get into the high 20s pretty easily if we need to. We can also absorb elements if we're taking things like fireballs or things like that to reduce those kinds of damage. We have Find Familiar. It's going to give us advantage on our first attack in combat, plus some scouting abilities. Our main attack is a +12 to hit, 1d8 +5 damage, but it's almost never going to be that. It's almost always going to be +7 to hit, 1d8 +15 damage, 3 attacks per round, 4 with haste, 7 if we use our action surge. This, of course, assumes a non-magic weapon. Certainly by this level, we're going to have at least a +1 longbow, probably +2, maybe we're already at +3. So I'm going to jump this character to level 15. So at level 15, we're going to get an ability score improvement. I am going to take a feat, and I'm going to take the lucky feat. Talked about the lucky feat lots of times, said it was the best feat in the game because it's useful for anyone, and once again it's useful for this character for multiple reasons. The first is, of course, if you are going to be taking an attack in combat and you have the haste spell up and you are worried about losing your concentration, you can have them take disadvantage on their attack roll. They'll probably miss. If they don't miss and you are about to do a concentration save and you would otherwise fail, you can use your Indomitable. It's usable twice per day now, but if that fails, then you can use your lucky to try yet again. And because you're proficient in Constitution saves, you certainly shouldn't fail that many times. Finally, we're using the Sharpshooter feat in combat. That means we're going to have advantage on our first attack. We're going to get 3 dice on that advantage because of Elven accuracy, but we're going to have additional attacks after that. Those ones will not have an advantage necessarily, depending on our situation. If we don't have advantage on those attacks, then that means things like lucky can give us effectively advantage, so that in the case where we would have missed, we can turn that into a hit. So it's going to increase our damage output. It's going to increase our ability to maintain our concentration. It's going to increase our defensive capabilities. It really kind of hits it on all points. And at 15th level, as an Eldritch Knight, we get Arcane Charge. At 15th level, you gain the ability to teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space when you use your action surge. You can teleport before or after the additional turn. So what this is it's like another Misty Step, except this one's not using our racial ability and it's not using our bonus action. So that means if we are, say, using a hand crossbow, we could do this and still use the hand crossbow in the same turn. Furthermore, we can combine this. We can use, let's say we use our action surge, we cast our haste with our action surge, we use a regular attack, our 3 regular attacks with our regular action, and then we can use Arcane Charge to teleport as well. So if we get maybe stuck in melee, we cast haste, we teleport out, and we still get our full attack. And then we get our haste action on top of that. We get another spell known at this point. I'm going to pick another 3rd level spell, and the spell I'm going to take is Thunderstep. Thunderstep is particularly useful, especially with an archer, because often you're back with the casters. Maybe you've got a god wizard there, and that god wizard and you are getting stuck in melee, and you need to get them out. You can be the one to cast Thunderstep. Let the god wizard cast a different spell altogether. Normally it's up to the god wizard to get you out, but now you can get the god wizard out, and that means they could do something like maybe a battlefield control. Maybe they could do a wall of force or something that might protect you. So this has some nice synergy there. So let's jump this character up to level 19. Now we're sitting on 2 ability score improvements here, and this is what I'm going to choose with each of them. The first ability score improvement I'm going to take is Magic Initiate. And the Magic Initiate I'm going to take is Warlock. Now the real reason we're taking this is for the spell Hex. Now although we have haste, there is a limited number of times we can use that spell. Hex gives us another option to add damage to every attack we make. A d6 damage to every attack will add up a lot when we're talking about a fighter. We are very close to the point where we can attack 10 times in a round potentially. If we do that and we add a haste, that's an additional 10d6 points of damage in one round. That's a lot of damage. Maybe not bringing us as much as a haste spell, but once a day as another option to increase damage, I'll definitely grab this. Now I get 2 Warlock cantrips. I don't really care what they are, so I'm going ahead and take Prestidigitation now and the Friends cantrip. If something else suits your purposes better, go ahead. In our level 19 ability score improvement, I'm also going to take another feat. The feat I'm going to take is Martial Adept. I don't necessarily love Martial Adept. I think getting 1 combat superiority die and a d6 isn't a great amount for a feat, but there is some nice synergy here when we're using it with an archer. I mentioned this when we were talking at the first about the type of fighter you might want to take, and I talked about the effectiveness of like a Goading Attack with an archer. Being able to do that is really useful. So it's nice to be able to throw that onto this character who is an Eldritch Knight. What Goading Attack does is when you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you expend 1 superiority die to attempt to goad the target into attacking you. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and the target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, that target has disadvantage on all attack rolls against targets other than you until the end of your next turn. So the big deal here is, as an archer, you're often out of range of the main enemies. So you fire an arrow at them, they can't get to you. That just gives them disadvantage. They have no way around it. They fail their saving throw, disadvantage on all attacks. When you're talking about a creature that really relies on attack rolls to do its damage, this becomes super effective. The second maneuver I'll take is Precision Attack. That allows me to add that d6 to my to hit roll. So in those cases where I'm using Sharpshooter and maybe I miss by 1 or 2, I can use this as a way to turn that miss into a hit. So at 19th level, we now have access to 4th level spells. So that means we're going to pick a 4th level spell. We're also probably going to switch one of our lower level spells to a 4th level spell. Right now I'm showing 2 known spells, so there's probably one I got last level that we're going to add now, and a spell at 19th level, both 4th level slots. The first one I'm going to take is Greater Invisibility. Greater Invisibility is going to give me the advantage on every attack that I've been waiting for this entire time. So when you combine this with Sharpshooter, this is amazing, especially when we're talking about a fighter, because I have so many attacks already. Being able to throw Greater Invisibility and getting advantage on every attack, and I have Elven Accuracy, which means 3 dice on every advantage roll. So this is going to be a huge number of attacks, and I can combine it with Action Surge, get myself 6 attacks in a round, all with advantage, all doing plus 10 damage. That's going to add up to a massive amount of damage on my turn. Second spell I'm going to take is Fire Shield. I've talked about Fire Shield before. One nice thing about it is it doesn't use concentration, so it can be combined with other effects. It tends to be the kind of thing you want to do in a combat where you know beforehand what you're going to be facing. You're going to be facing a red dragon, you want Fire Shield, those kinds of things. Now, if you were in the middle of combat, there's no reason you couldn't use an Action Surge to get your Fire Shield up. That's a pretty hefty price to pay, though, because there's a lot of arrows with every action. So getting a Fire Shield instead of 3 arrows from an Eldritch Knight at this level isn't necessarily a good deal. So we're going to level up our final level to level 20. At level 20, we get our final extra attack. We can now attack 4 times with an action. This is the whole reason we want to do straight fighter, is for this 4th attack, because even paladins, barbarians, rangers, all of them, they're going to be doing 2 attacks with their action, and sometimes a 3rd attack with a bonus action. In our case, we can do 4 attacks with our action, plus we can Action Surge to get additional 4 attacks. We can do that all while we're invisible, getting advantage on every single attack. Every single attack is getting 3 dice because of Elven Accuracy, meaning they're all going to hit. We're going to hit with every attack, and every attack is going to get plus 10 damage, plus our dexterity, plus the base weapon damage, plus the bonus damage for magic weapon. So this is the kind of damage you can expect to be able to do in one single round with this character. Plus, we have 164 hit points. We have a Constitution saving throw of +8, meaning our concentration is going to be very difficult to get rid of. And even if we fail, we have Indomitable, and we can use it twice. And even if that fails, we have Lucky. So we just have time and time again, we can keep up our concentration no matter what. So those hastes or those greater invisibilities just hold. And our defense is so strong because not only are we sitting on 164 hit points, but we have the shield spell available. We have the absorb element spell available. Great invisibility is giving disadvantage to our enemies. If we have haste, we're getting a +2 armor class from that. We can control where we move on the battlefield. We can Misty Step with our Racial. We can effectively Misty Step with our Eldritch Knight, or we could just cast the spell. So offensively, this is a powerhouse. Defensively, this is a powerhouse. Now, in terms of actual spell casting, there's not a lot we can do. We can improve our ability to take damage. We can improve our ability to deal damage. That's about it. This is kind of a one-note character. This is an archer. But when we're making an archer, and I often get told, if I was making an Eldritch Knight, what spells would I take? These are the spells I'd probably be looking at with an Eldritch Knight. For the most part, even with the melee character, the spell selection wouldn't change all that much. So that's my character, the Eldritch Knight. Now, next time we're going to be looking at the Hexblade, and we're going to make another archer. That archer is going to be a little bit more based on spell casting, a little less one note, and we're really going to be looking at that Elven accuracy because we're going to make a crit fishing build with that character. So that is a character that's going to look for criticals, and then when it gets criticals, it's going to throw a pile of damage on there. So I'm going to show you how to do that on our next video. Until then, I'm going to sit back and relax and have some fun because D&D is for everyone. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.